All right, guys, we're live. It's Justin Stenson from EliteLifeNutrition.com, and my guest today is Candice Horbacz, also known as Eva Lovia, famous internet porn star, I guess webcam star, would you say?
No, no, no. I dabbled in that in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Former anyways. Yeah. But now you're doing a lot of really interesting things that I think align, as I mentioned a moment ago, with what we talk about on the Elite Life podcast a lot. And you even mentioned too, talking about it a moment ago, about some plant medicines that you're working with your husband on and getting that started. Well, after you kind of stopped the breastfeeding thing, because you can't really do both at the same time, but you had a newborn um, somewhat. And, you're very much into health, nutrition, fitness, it seems, and a holistic type of approach to life. Well, so I really respect that. And we have a lot to cover in today's episode. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So, just real quickly for some of the listeners who know you probably better, even mentioned it a moment ago, like that's kind of the clickbaity thing. Eva, is it Lovia or Lovia?
Lovia, you actually got it right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks. So, so some of the users might know you by that name. Can you just talk quickly about like your background doing that and how you transitioned into what you're doing right now?
So I was in the adult industry for, I don't know, I guess it depends on when you start counting. I got in at 19. I was out at about 26. I started my own production company towards the end of it. I was a contract star for the majority of it, so I primarily worked for one really big company most of my career. And I kind of always said if I stopped having fun or if it started to feel like the wrong thing, that I would get out. And I just kind of had more and more instances where it felt like the wrong thing. And as we were talking a little bit before we started, Web3 and this decentralized model is kind of showing up in a lot of these more legacy and inflamed institutions. So you have this old model, this legacy model, which is making a whole bunch of people really rich at the very top, but at the end of the day, they're not giving any royalties or taking care of any of the performers. It's kind of a turn and burn process. And you get in super young, usually, and then you're in for maybe a year, which is horrible because there's a lot of consequences that come from that decision. And I don't think that there's no way to know all of them, right? And I don't think you understand the gravity of that decision, especially if you go in very young. So you make this life altering decision, you maybe get a year's worth of pay, and then that's it. And that just seemed really predatory and really backwards to me. So I started, like a lot of other people, creating my own content that I own, that I'm now in charge of, that I fundamentally felt more safe producing, and that is going to be worth that massive decision. So, yeah, it just, my principles and values weren't being aligned with, and I just saw more and more bad behavior. So I left, and I think like it was during the pandemic where I'd go online and I would have so much anxiety. I had a newborn too at that time, and there was just so much divisiveness and so much othering happening. And I was like, there has to be another way. Being outraged gets a lot of clicks, of course, right? And I'm not knocking that model if that's what someone wants to do. But I think that what I love about someone like Lex Friedman, for example, is like he's going a third way. How do I approach really heavy topics with love, compassion, and trying to get people to understand someone that they might disagree with rather than fight someone that they disagree with? And when I started the podcast, I wanted it to be a place for people to approach things with more curiosity and less conclusion. And that includes selfishly, like how they perceive me. And I was reading this quote the other day, and it was like, it was equating people to books. And it says, most people will see your cover, very few will read the introduction, and almost no one will know the content. And everyone will judge you for whatever section that they land on. And I felt like that resonated so deeply with me because so many people, they see porn star, and that's a forever thing. It doesn't matter if I did two films or if I did 2000. It's this label that I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And it doesn't matter if I was a victim and kind of pushed into it, which I was not, or what is actually surprising and even worse, wanted to get into it on my own volition, right? No matter what, it's like this permanent brand that I have. So when I saw that, it's like so many people see that one thing, put me in this very convenient bucket so they don't have to think about it and just chalk me up to an unworthy and bad person. So a lot of this was fuel for the podcast. Like, how can I challenge all of these assumptions? And just simply by being myself, I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm not trying to say, I want you to change your values or your morals or how you feel about sexuality. I'm just offering a different perspective and trying to show more of myself, like my actual self, instead of this persona that simply existed for one purpose in one channel. So, just, I guess, trying to change hearts and minds, essentially. No small feat.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's cool. And all right, so there's a few things that I'd like to ask about what you mentioned. But so first off, what you said about like 19 or so you got into it. What
Yes.
what was the propeller that wanted to get you into this? What was the you said you weren't forced into it like some girls. There wasn't some kind of like it seems like anyways, there wasn't some kind of like trauma. I mean, you seem like a very logical, smart woman, who has her, good head on her shoulders. But that can't be the case for a lot of other people. At least that's what we assume, like from the outside. Like, someone there has to be trauma, there has to be daddy issues, there has to be this, that, and the other
Mm-hmm.
thing. But it seems like in your case that wasn't the situation. What was it in you that made you want to get into this business, which, does have a bad stigma in the general public?
I think it's hard to look at one exact reason. And it sounds so crazy when I say it out loud. And I know some people roll their eyes, but it felt like that was where I was supposed to be. It felt like my growth was going to happen there. And I think that whether we come into this world and we kind of know certain challenges or like lessons, or if you wanted to call it karma, things that we're supposed to kind of figure out before we move on, I feel like that was part of it for me. It was like something that I had to feel a certain level of pain and pressure, and it was my opportunity to discover myself and figure out what I was made of and if I was going to sink or swim. And I mean, I moved around a ton as a kid. I was always constantly bullied for one reason or another. I always kind of lived life on the outside, so that's kind of where I became very comfortable. And I think part of that decision, knowingly or not, to get into something that is so controversial is maybe to like stay on the outside. Some people just do better there, and that's their comfort zone, is kind of outside of societal norms. And they actually get more anxiety if you throw them in the middle. I think part of it is that part. So part of it is my upbringing. Part of it's probably my wiring, and ultimately the role models that I gravitated towards and saw as an expander for me were these powerhouse women like Pamela Anderson and Carmen Electra and Tara Patrick. Like, they were these living, breathing goddesses to me. And I was like, there's something so powerful of someone who's unapologetically connected to their sensuality. And especially as a woman, we live in this like era where women were taught to like lead with force and to try to be a man, and that doesn't seem to work. These women seemed to get to like levels of success that most people never will, with softness, with femininity and like sensuality. And to me, that's what I wanted to become. Like, I was very much in the forced and like in my masculine and trying to like fight and compete and win. And I knew I didn't want to be there. I didn't know how to do the other thing, but I'm like, well, they all did magazines. They all were at some level using their body as an expression. So if I follow what they did, maybe I can figure it out too.
Okay. Yeah. And so some people might say, why don't you just do like the model thing or like the, Victoria's Secret thing or something like that? Like, what made you take like the ultimate step, which is the porn thing and getting naked in front of the world, essentially? Like, I mean, it's you have to have some courage to do that, I think. And there's a little bit of, some people would say insanity, some people would say courage, maybe a mix of both. But you
Hmm.
do have to have like a certain thing in you to push you to, I think, to get to that level. Was there something that inside you wanted to be like, you know, above and beyond the sort of just model thing that some women would strive to?
Well, I'm 5'3", so there is no chance I was ever going to be a Victoria's Secret model, and I've always been like 125, 135. So again, that was
Okay.
never, now I can, right? Because they hire pretty much anybody. But back then, when you had the Angels, there was like zero chance. I would have loved to do something like that. I think that the way that you can express your sensuality and your feminine energy can be a wide spectrum, right? It can be very modest and it can be very extreme, and it's figuring out what expression aligns most with you. And for me, I had a lot of shame and fear around sex. Like, I had only been with a couple guys. My experiences weren't that great. I didn't have healthy role models. It was either abstinence. And then even like when my mom would talk to me about it, it was like she was so insecure and filled with shame when she would talk to me. So how am I supposed to feel about it? I had no way to discover it. And to me, discovering it on set with like a quote professional seemed to be safer than to just go out and date around and like I don't know. It was a way to explore like just sexuality, just sensuality without it being connected to long-term relationship. And some people can say that that's bad, but on the flip side, I was in a relationship for 7 years, and it was the guy I lost my virginity to. We dated for a while before that even happened. And because I was taught abstinence or sex only occurs within marriage and you have to love the person if you do it, I now felt like I was stuck with this person. I gave away all of my virtue. I gave away everything that was valuable of me, which is so insane because I am so much more than like this pretend thing I'm giving to you. It kept me in that relationship a lot longer than I would have been there if I didn't have that programming. So if I understood that sex can be spiritual, sex can be this convergence of two people where you are never more connected, and it's very significant, but it can also be frivolous. It can also be just for pleasure, and you can have connection for a moment with somebody that can be really deep. So it's like choose the level that you want to play at and like what flavor that you want to experience. You don't have to do all of them, and you don't have to just do one of them, but like these are the options. And I think that would have left me in a much healthier place when I was dating, especially being at a really young, impressionable age.
So for you, was the sex important? Was that a big part of it? And is it still just as big of a part as it was before? Or because say you've had sex so many times, it's like it's not as big of an issue now, and or not even an issue, but like of importance, something that you really factor into your relationships today as you used to before.
I think when you prohibit something or you make it like you give it the stigma of being the boogeyman, all of a sudden it's like forbidden fruit and you want more and more and more of it. And I think that we see that anytime that we've made something illegal. Like look at the prohibition. What did it do? It boosted sales for
Yeah.
bootleggers and then it ended up hurting the consumer for that. And I think it's the same thing with anything. I think you don't want to exile anything, but you also want to integrate it in a very healthy way. So it gave me a more honest perspective of all of the different vibrations that sex can be and connection can be, and understanding that intimacy and sex are not the same thing, right? Like again, like you can have sex with someone that doesn't necessarily mean that they love you or that they're intimately connected, and you can be intimate with someone without having sex. So I think it just like took the stigma away for me. You know what I mean? So now I can
Yeah.
actively choose like how do I want to participate in this?
Okay. So it didn't ruin any of the intimacy factor then with your later relationships, and I'm supposing your marriage today, where like, for some people that's what they think of when they think of sex. It's like the ultimate intimate moment. So if you've done it already, whatever, hundreds of times before with other people, or it's for some people it loses that glory or that, magic to it. But for you, you looked at it a different way, is what you're saying. Like it wasn't about that, and you can separate this and you can separate that. So it's not the same.
Well, there's nothing to run out, right? And I think that that's the misconception a lot of people have. It's like, okay, well, now you're used up or you're washed up or have you done it so many times that you're no longer going to be able to pair bond or to connect. And I think there's a fallacy there because if you're with somebody and let's say it's till death do us part, you hopefully are with this person for like 60 plus years. Are you saying that there's going to be a breaking point where after you have so much sex with even just this one person, and especially with just this one person, that you can no longer appreciate, connect with, find divinity with, find novelty within? And I would challenge like anyone that thinks that sex is the ultimate intimate act. I mean, if you've ever given birth to a child, having your husband there during that process, like that is immensely more intimate to me. If you've ever done eye gazing with someone, to me, that can be just as intimate, if not more, because it's amazing how many people don't look at each other when they have sex, even if you're married. It's crazy. I know so many like women that want the lights off, and that breaks my heart because you're missing out on so much fun and so many other things that you could be introducing to that container. So there's so many things that are intimate that go beyond sex. So there's not like a certain amount of times that you have sex and no longer can you appreciate it. I think the trick is how can you get deeper? How can you be present and experience each moment as brand new, especially if you're in a monogamous relationship? Like that's so crucial.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, I know we're jumping around a little bit too. I think, the listeners know I have a bit of ADD. So when something pops in my head, I kind of go on this tangent or that one. So we're bouncing around a little bit, but what are your thoughts on monogamy in today's world versus polyamorous relationships? Or I think I read, I'm not sure if this is correct, but I think you have an open relationship or open marriage. Is that right?
We're closed at the moment, and we made that decision like a little bit before we started getting ready to try to have children. And I think monogamy is beautiful. I think it is a great default setting for most people. I do think that there's conscious monogamy and there's unconscious monogamy. There's conscious atypical relationship and there's unconscious atypical relationship, whether that's open, monogamous, poly, whatever labels that you want to slap on it. I think what you have to do if you don't want to be one of the 50% of people that end up in a divorce, and this is all people, this isn't just poly people or whatever, this is monogamous couples. 50% are ending up in divorce. And you say monogamy, but there's a lot of cheating happening. There's a lot of third, fourth, and fifth people involved in that marriage for it to be, quote, monogamous. It's just monogamous on the surface. I think that you have to say something's not working. And I'm not blaming monogamy. I'm blaming people just drifting through their life and not consciously making choices for them, right? Like something that is tailor made for them and their husband or their wife or whatever variation that you want to configure. And I think that we steer away from these difficult conversations because we're scared if we're honest about what we want in a relationship, we're going to drive the other person away. Well, now you're building a relationship on really faulty foundation because all that it is, it's built on this lie. As long as I can pretend to be this person for you, we might survive. And eventually that ends up crumbling and falling, whether it's because like you feel deeply unloved because you haven't shown your true self to this person. So on some level, you feel like they love me only because they think they know me, but they wouldn't if they did. Or because like you start seeking extracurricular activities again because you're not being honest within the relationship. So you have to dive into these uncomfortable decisions or conversations pretty quickly so you can figure out if you're a right person or not. And it's nothing to take offense with. It's no one's fault. It's you pair up with who you pair up with, and some of it is kind of indescribable. We don't know why we're attracted to who we're attracted to, but we can decide if our values and what we want out of life are the same. So I think it's important to be upfront and be honest with yourself and with whoever it is that you're trying to build a life with.
Yeah. But based on your experience, though, do you think monogamy still works in this day and age, 2023, going forward, 2024, where we have so many different options at our fingertips? Our Facebook list has grown into the thousands. We have Tinder, we have Hinge, we have all these dating apps, we have all these people around us, and all this porn, like all this stimuli hitting us all the time and, giving us ideas of what we want to try out. Like, do you think monogamy still works in this day and age? And the fact that you even mentioned 50% of relationships end up in divorce, probably over that, I think, at this point, and it's growing, it continue to getting worse. And the fact that you mentioned that even these monogamous relationships aren't really monogamous if we really think about the hidden, partners and affairs that take place. But do you think that monogamy can work successfully in this day and age?
I think it absolutely can. It's just you have to know why that is the model that you want, and your partner has to know why it is what they want, and you have to constantly be checking in. Is this still working for you? Is there anything I can do to provide for you? How can I make you feel fulfilled, taken care of, loved, seen, heard, all of that? And that goes both ways. I think that we live in a place where, again, there are so many options and we get so much anxiety and FOMO, but your life is built upon making a decision and sticking with it. So even if you are poly, usually there's one main partner. If you're monogamish or whatever, again, there's so many labels, I don't even know them all, but you are committed to one person. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to some people. Like, how can you be committed if you're also with other people? And that's something that you kind of have to do a little exercise game with. Like, I'm not here to like preach whatever. I'm not going to convince, if you think it's wrong and immoral and whatever, I'm not going to convince you otherwise. I'm just saying, like, maybe do some thought exercises is to see, like, what does marriage really mean to you? Is it just who you have sex with? Is that it? Like, that's the contract. This piece of paper means I only have sex with you and you only have sex with me, and that is the entirety of our relationship. I'd say that's really shallow. I want my marriage to be so much more than sex, and I don't want sex to be something that can shatter my union all at the same time. So I look at it very different. My husband looks at it very different. We're not, again, we're not open at the moment, but like, because of my career and everything that we've been through, if someone were to have an extracurricular activity, if they were to like cheat or whatever we would call it, it would be a conversation. It wouldn't be this like fueled, energetically charged me locking him out of the house and saying, you'll see your kids every other weekend. Fuck that. You know what I mean? That is not what I want. My marriage is so much stronger than that. My family is so much stronger than that. And like, my boys deserve me to be so much stronger than that. So I just see it very differently. So I think monogamy can work, be moving forward. You just have to know why you want it and commit to the thing. And then if it is challenging for you and it's not what you truly want, have that conversation. I think people would be so surprised at how open other people are to alternative, I don't know, relationships. It's over 30% of millennials have tried some type of relationship outside of monogamy. Now, it doesn't work for everyone, again, because you have to have really honest communication. You have to work on yourself on a deep level where you are pushing your ego aside, you're pushing possessiveness to the side, you're not looking at love from a controlling angle, but like, how can I watch you be the most free and be happy for you, no matter what that is, even if that happiness doesn't include me. And that's challenging, right? Like, we love our person, but the moment that we see people divorce, it's like, how did those people love each other at all? I don't see any love left. And if anything, they're actually trying to like tear each other down and be the most vindictive. And that's terrifying, right? Like, that's not love. You should be able to love even in those circumstances.
You think for women and men it's different though to say see their partner go out and have sex with another person? Like, for instance, is it easy? And I think in a way, like, I'm kind of saying this from my own point of view, where like, in primordial days, hundreds of thousands of years ago or whatever, just for like from the past hundreds of thousands of years up until this point, men have historically, from what we can gather anyways, been more likely to have sex with multiple partners because they try to spread their seed. And that's kind of like what we're wired to do, whereas women are more wired to partner up with a man and have that man raise the child. So
That's actually challenged a lot. So that's
yeah,
not,
so that's a
yeah.
theory, right? Like, that's what
Hmm.
they say, and it kind of makes sense, but now we don't really know for sure. Like, so what do you say to that? Like, is that what you believe is the case, whereas like men are sort of more promiscuous because of that fact that we're wired to spread our seed? Or do you think that's kind of bullshit and that we're equally men and women promiscuous and we kind of both want to do it?
So there's this idea, and you can ask if it is contrived and it is, or if it is intentionally presented in such a way as to manipulate people. So our closest relatives are what?
What do you call it? Fuck, I'm drawing a blank.
So most people would say
What are they?
apes.
Okay, well, I thought you meant the actual like
Oh, okay. No, 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 no. I meant like,
Homo
right,
sapiens, and then what's the
yeah,
other one?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Neanderthals, and there's like a
Yeah.
couple
Okay.
other.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm talking about like animals now. So most people would say apes, and that's
Yeah.
where they would end the conversation. We're actually just we are equally related to bonobos. Now they look very similar. If you're not a primate specialist, you might say that they're the same. They're
Hmm.
very, very, very different.
Yeah.
So when we look at chimp behavior, like, well, that's why we do that, because look at how chimps behave. So if we evolved from them, if the men are very territorial, there's super high competition, there's resource guarding, which also includes the females. Um, the women are mating with one male particularly, and then some of the other ones get some, but primarily they're mating with the one male. He's mating with everyone else. That must be the model. Well, if we're going to have a fair conversation, we also have to look at the bonobo because, again, we're equally related to the bonobo. Now, the bonobos operate much more from like a egalitarian perspective. Like they share a lot of things. There's very little resource guarding. There's very little fighting. There's very little competition. The women, like the females, will actually use sex as a tool. So if they need a male to help her with something, she'll offer sex and then he'll help build her nest or he'll bring her food. They share everything. They share the duties of raising the young. They share the women. The women are not by any means, or I say women, the females are not any by any means monogamous in that relationship. And then if you look at some of the data from Sex at Dawn or the idea of sperm wars, if you have a woman and she's in her fertile window, she is actually in this, if she's in her fertile window and she's with a long-term partner, if she has had a child with that partner, she is more likely to find him so irritating, start a fight with him, cheat on him, and actually more likely to get pregnant by the affair than by the long-term partner. This is for biodiversity. We also have the shape of the penis, which is said to like plunge out the competitor's sperm. So like it's thought that multiple partners would mate with a woman during her fertile window, and then there was this sperm competition to see like who is going to impregnate her. So if you look at more of the utopian version, you have all of these males that now don't know if it's theirs, and obviously that's not an exact model for humans. Like the baby comes out looking like the dad, so we know who the dad is, and if there's any confusion, we have science. So I'm not saying to do this for humans, but I'm saying back then you have a whole bunch of men that now take the responsibility of this is our child and we are all going to protect it because this is our tribe. It's not like my kid, my kid, my kid only. That's not my kid, see you later, good luck, you know what I mean? It's more of this harmonious system. So if you can have either, I think that you can choose, and you can choose to be the ape or you can choose to be the bonobo. And like, do you want to live in this place where everything is competition and everything is mine, 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 mine? Or do you want to look at things from more of an abundance and more like sharing more collective? And I'm not saying go start a commune and have orgies under this moon every 30 days or whatever it is. I'm not like saying anything wacky. I'm just saying you can choose your relationship to jealousy, possessiveness, and again, going back to curating what kind of relationship do you want? And this idea that men are the only ones that have sought out sex because they have like some evolutionary need, or they're the only ones that have that kind of drive is false. Because if that was true, then why don't you guys have an organ that is strictly for pleasure? Why is it women? Why are we the only people that have an organ that is only function is pleasure, which is the clitoris? There's no other function. And it is a very complex, beautiful organ. So glad we have them, but there's no other function.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I mean, we're wired for pleasure.
yeah, I guess that's a good point if you look at it that way. Yeah, you guys do have a specific internal, well, not internal, but external
Both.
organ.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's both. Most of it is actually inside. So
Is that
you have like the hood, which, and underneath the hood you have like the head of the clitoris, and then underneath it's like this whole almost like a Christmas tree that's inside, and then
like
that's what you call like the G spot. So it's almost just like all of these little tendrils
ner
that come
nerves,
down.
nerves, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, almost like a root to a tree. Like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to be quite honest, I don't really know the answer. I just
No one does. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, yeah, here's the thing. I like your approach because you're open to either side, it seems like, but you make a good point for the other side. And I hate people in general that just say like, oh, it's this way or it's that way. And we're talking about things that happened thousands of years ago, the
Hmm.
dawn of, like, we don't even know how humans were formed. Never mind, like, yeah, all
Hmm.
the mysteries of today's world we can't figure
Hmm.
out, and we're going to pretend like
Hmm.
we know what happened and how humans were created and this and that. So it's like,
For sure.
who the hell knows, right? But in your experience, so this is probably a better question than in your experience being around this industry, um, do you to you does it seem like men and women are both equally promiscuous? They both equally want to have sex the same, or perhaps women want it even more, they just don't necessarily do it as much.
I think women want as much sex as men, and sometimes, oh, I wouldn't say probably more. Just because of how our hormones are. Like we have such like
You
really low dips in
you
certain
would say
parts of the
probably
month.
more, or you wouldn't
No, I
say?
said I wouldn't say more.
Okay, wouldn't. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, especially when you're ovulating, that's like the closest to male sex drive I think that most women will ever get. If you're not on the pill, you
Yeah.
will feel like an insane urge, like nothing else matters. I just have to do this thing. And then that's biology. But I think that women want just as much sex as men typically. Maybe not in the same ways, like maybe not as spontaneous. I think we need a lot more revving up. We need like a lot more care beforehand. And then also there's the element of safety where I don't think most men that's on the docket. I don't think that that's something that probably crosses your mind or a checklist before you're like, I want to have sex.
Never.
But women, you guys are so much bigger, stronger, faster, right? Like you could literally kill us, especially in that position. It's very vulnerable. So I think if that element of safety isn't there, then we shut down. So that's like the number one killer of our sex drive. So I think that's why you don't see women that want to be promiscuous because there's no safety. But if they've done this study, and it was super flawed, and this is where that model of women don't want sex, like they don't really want sex as much as much as men. So they would go to college campuses and they would ask the men, and show them like some picture of like a really beautiful woman. So, do you want to have sex with her? Would you go home with her right now? And like every guy was like, yeah, hell yeah. They did that with the women, and they'd show like a picture of an attractive man, and almost all of the women said no. So they're like, see, women do not want casual sex. Well, this is fundamentally flawed because you're not accounting for safety. You're not like that is so important for women. So then they found an attractive man that the girl had known, like the young woman had known, and had a good reputation. She felt safe around him. Almost every woman said yes.
Mm.
So it totally changed the outcome of the model. So I think that, yes, we don't see women out there doing one night stands. They don't feel safe. It's not smart. Even in today's world, it is not smart. I've heard some horrific stories. When I was in college, there were some wild ones where like girls were almost getting kidnapped. So like don't do that, right? Like there are bad guys. But if you introduce the element of safety and they know that they're going to be taken care of, it's a game changer.
Yeah, that's such a good point, actually. It really is because you're comparing apples to oranges in the first comparison, but when the element of safety is introduced in all like variables are equated for, everything's
Mhm.
fair. I would say that's probably true. I'd say women want sex just as much as men.
Right.
Um, they just don't want to feel like something's gonna happen to them. And in certain situations like college parties and dorm things and all this shit, like you hear it all the time. Like women get
Mhm.
raped or they get too drunk and something like so yeah,
Yeah.
that makes total sense. As far as like going back to your career and starting this business, did you want to like become this super famous person? Did you want to just kind of do it, make a little bit of money and then kind of get out? Or did you actually have the ability, like, did you have the desire to want to like go in and become like this famous porn star? And like you said, like the Pamela Andersons, like those are kind of some of your role models. Did you want to become them and kind of blow up to where you are today? Or was it more just like, let me see how this goes. I'll try it out. And, if I like it or not, maybe I'll stay in, maybe not.
No, I definitely like I wanted to be successful. And I was doing really well financially. I was working like three jobs, bartending, waiting tables, and for being in college, I was crushing it. So
Yeah.
that set me up for a really good position when I entered the industry because when they were offering my initial rates, I was like, absolutely not. I make more than this at Hooters. That's not happening. So it made me have a higher value for myself than most people knew to have going in. But no, I knew I wanted to be successful, and it's weird because I was like, I know I'm going to be. And maybe that was arrogance, and maybe that was just naivete from being, 19 going in. But I was like, I know that this is going to work out for me, and I don't know how many people feel that going in and then they don't, right? I have no idea, but
Yeah.
yeah, for me, I just knew it was going to happen.
Were you worried at all about what your friends or family, mainly your parents, might think if you went down this career path, or were you just like, no, or did you have a good relationship? You're like, no, cool. Like my mom supports it. I'm all down for it. Like, how did that go?
All my friends knew, like they were like, of course, that's what she's doing. I'm not surprised at all. A couple of them, because of the relationships that they were in, fell out for a while. I've had some family members that I still don't talk to, and most of it and it's not to excuse it, but most of it is because of the pressure that they get from like their friends or their girlfriends. It's stuff like it's not their own feelings,
Ah,
which is kind of shitty.
yeah,
Um, and then
interesting.
insert daddy joke here, or daddy issues here. I don't talk to my dad. He decided to not be a father when I was 13, and
Okay.
yeah, I've made a lot of efforts with that. It doesn't ever move the needle.
Yeah.
So that relationship didn't exist. And then my mom, she was pretty furious. She was pretty furious for a long time. And I don't know. I think that if you were to ask her, she would say, I wish that it was something else, but now she's just happy that I'm happy.
Yeah. That's good.
Hmm.
Um, so it's so stereotypical, right? Like
I
the
know.
dad, the daddy issue thing.
Yeah.
Um, but there is something to that. I don't know in your
For
case, but
sure.
in
Yeah.
general, there's something to like almost every single stripper I've ever met. And I used to bartend too, by the way. So I know there's not like a lot of correlation, but there's some correlation between some bartenders. It was a nightclub. There's some correlation between some bartenders because I knew like 3 or 4 girls that were bartending that then became strippers or that were strippers that bartended in this nightclub. And by the way, when we're talking about like how much women want sex, how promiscuous women are, the locker room talk. Some people say it's a men thing. I know just how bad these women get. It's just as
Yeah.
bad, if not worse, with women than with men. So when you say some of these points, I'm like, yeah, that's totally makes sense from my experience. But yeah, no, there's definitely a correlation there between daddy issues and strippers, and perhaps I don't know porn stars, in general per se, but seems like that would be one of the things as well. And I don't know exactly what it is, but maybe it has something to do with attention. You want more attention, you want more praise. Some might say narcissism. Again, you don't strike me as somebody who seems like a narcissistic person, to be quite honest, but some might say it's like a narcissistic trait where you didn't get that, attention when you were a kid, and then you grow up and you need that attention from other people, especially mainly men in
Hmm.
situations like that. Um, but is that your experience working with other people? Do they tend to have daddy issues as well in the porn industry, or is it kind of like overrated?
Honestly, I think fatherlessness is an issue. It's an epidemic. It's for
Yeah.
everybody, and it's not just in porn. I mean, there's this really good book called The Boy Crisis that I highly recommend everybody read, even if you don't have sons. Like if there's a man in your life that you
Mm.
give a shit about, I highly recommend that book. It's thick, it's intimidating when you look at it, but it's really, really, really important. So I mean, one of the biggest predictors of a child's outcomes and their success in life is going to be, is there a present father figure in the home, right? Is he participating and showing love and attention and nurturing and providing and all of these things? There's a lot of men that aren't in the home, and that's having devastating effects on everything, right? For how young boys are failing to leave the nest, right? Like they don't have a sense of purpose, they don't have confidence. Like there's crazy high suicide rates for boys compared to girls. So it's not just affecting girls, and it's not like if you don't have a dad, you're gonna end up in porn. It's like if you don't have a dad, the consequences are really potentially grave. So that affects everybody if there's no dad in the house. And it would be crazy to say that that didn't have an impact on me. And I have other siblings, and it's affected all of us in very different ways and like very statistically significant ways, right? Like there's some that have like issues with drugs, there's some that have experienced homelessness. I'm, in sex work. I mean, like ding, 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 we hit all of the markers right there in one household. And that's sad. I don't think that that's something that people should be dunking on, because some people, I'm sure the comments will be filled, and this is typical. It'll be like, of course she doesn't have a dad. That's something to dunk on. Is it something to dunk on that someone might like kill themselves because like they didn't feel loved and they never felt safe because there was no man in the house? Is it something to dunk on that someone's more likely to experience homelessness because they don't have a father? Like these are really, really, really shitty things, and we have to look at why are these fathers not in the home, and then there's like so many reasons as to why that's happening, and relationships are ending and marriages are ending, and the child support and how visitation breaks down. But I think within the industry, I would venture to say probably most performers, both men and women, probably don't have the best relationship with their father. No.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's very interesting too that you mentioned the males, the men in these industries as well. And the dynamic. Who wrote that book, by the way? Do you know? Boy Crisis.
I want to say, what is his name? I want to say his first name's Jonathan.
Um,
Let me
'Cause
see
I'm
if I can find it really quick.
thinking of the
I
famous black conservative author who talks about this subject all the time. I'm drawing a blank on his name as well. I wonder if it's him or not.
no, this one is by John Gray and Warren Farrell.
It's not Dr. John Gray, is it?
Yes.
The guy who wrote Men Are From Mars and
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
oh
yeah.
yeah, I'm friends with him. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's been on the
Oh,
show like
wow.
3 or 4 times. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, he did.
great
I
dude.
want to say he did the appendix for the book or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
the beginning of it, the intro.
No, like the end. So there's like some like the end portion he focuses on alternative therapies for ADHD, and I think that that was what
Oh,
he contributed to the book.
oh, okay. Yeah, I have his book too behind me. It's he wrote the same probably subjects he's talking about, but his because he had early Parkinson's. He treated
Oh, I
himself with
didn't know
early
that.
yeah, he treated himself with tyrosine, which is a dopamine precursor. So you take tyrosine and it actually creates dopamine as opposed to taking L-Dopa, which is what they prescribe. And it just like it's kind of like steroids. Like you take testosterone, works for a little bit, yeah, but over the long haul, it's not healthy. And then your body stops producing dopamine. And going back to dopamine, your body stops producing dopamine again naturally. So then you just kind of like you're screwed over the long. But if you take tyrosine in high doses and a couple other things, a couple amino acids,
Wow.
you can get back to actually producing it again on your own, among a few other things like natural, I think he called it like denatured protein, a few other things. But he had a whole system and he wrote about it in the book because actually ADD is the same type of problem as Parkinson's, where not enough dopamine is being
Hmm.
created naturally by the body.
Hmm.
So he
Hmm.
figured out his like ADD problem and then like at the same time knocked out the pre-Parkinson's, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, my husband has pretty significant ADD, and he's been doing cold plunge, and that has seemed to help a lot. That and meditation.
Yeah, I just saw a quick thing before this interview on your Instagram with the More Plates, More Dates guy. He was talking about that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, he's smart too. He's a really smart guy. I want to try to get him on.
Yeah,
But
he's great.
yeah, he was talking about like the adrenaline that gets released and the dopamine and how it's different from like porn or different avenues of stimuli.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. It was a good
Yeah,
clip.
I can try to connect you guys in an email.
Yeah, if you could, yeah, I like
Yeah,
him. This is Derek,
yeah.
right? His name's Derek.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
fantastic. I work with his company. He has this company called Merrick Health, and it's like kind of longevity based and preventative medicine, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys that I actually will see things on YouTube pop up and I'll like click his videos because every time you listen to him, he's like full of all this incredible knowledge, but he's
Hmm.
so like super like normal and grounded and he's not trying to like sound pedantic and like, like some of these guys, you know how they talk and it's like
Yeah.
he sounds like a regular one of us, but he's also
Hmm.
like super smart and it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
refreshing. So yeah, that'd be cool. I'd like to talk to him. But what were we talking about a minute ago? Shit.
We were talking about the boy crisis and incorporating males
Yeah.
into this
That's right.
conversation.
That's right.
Hmm.
It is such a crisis. And two, one of the big communities that it's hit is the Black community. There's a statistic, I think it was in the 1960s or 70s, where the rate of fatherlessness in the Black community was like 19-20%. And
Hmm.
today, and it's unbelievably correlated with the crime rates in the Black community. Today, it's
Hmm.
like 80% of Black homes have no father in them. And it's like
Hmm.
the same exact numbers. You can match it up, directly correlates with the crime rate that has shot up in the last few decades, and unfortunately in the Black community. And that's a big part of it. Now, people will say, oh, it's poverty, it's this and that. But if you look at the numbers, you've seen that the government has given the Black community more money over the last few decades than any time before. So it doesn't
Hmm.
have to do with the amount of money that's being pumped into the community. It has almost directly, like not 100%, but mostly, overwhelmingly, the correlation between fatherlessness and what's happening in that community, unfortunately.
And
And
that's what's really interesting too with how the divorce courts deal with custody and what do you call it, child support.
mhm,
So I love that you said that it's not about money because it's not about money. And so we kind of fundamentally know that. We know that we can't buy our kids love and
mhm,
that we can't fake that relationship. You have to show up. But we make men, because it's usually men, we make men pay these really high child support rates. And I'm not saying that you don't need to financially support your family. Like you absolutely do. Like
yeah,
obviously there needs to be taken care of. However, you put this kind of alarming number on a lot of men's paycheck. It automatically gets cut. So now they're working extra to be able to afford the child support, and now they're not seeing the kid. And what they talk about in the boy crisis is if you were to actually, instead of requiring a certain amount of money that the father contributes, it's a certain amount of time that he has to spend with the kid, right? Like you actually court order time and bonding and not a paycheck, you would have such different outcomes. So we're creating more of a problem and like perpetuating it by having child support because now the dad is even further gone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible. And I was actually going to say something very similar to that, which is the government is actually incentivizing um, single moms. Like they'll give moms a ton more money as opposed to if they get married and they stay with the father and the father's around in the child's relation in the child's life. It's like you're doing the opposite of what you're supposed to do when you're talking about like a family dynamic and raising these young boys which turn into young men. You're incentivizing the wrong thing. You're incentivizing the broken home and the split up home and the father, like you said, having to work overtime and all these hours. And then, his life is miserable and he can't afford the child support. And then he ends up, resenting
Mm-hmm.
the mom and resenting the child that he's supposed to be loving. And it's like, it's totally backwards. And it's, if I was a conspiracy theorist, like some, I would say that there's something to that. Like they don't actually want these young men to grow up and be successful and have, that strong family dynamic. And they want to have these, broken homes where you have these people going out and kind of ruining the rest of society, unfortunately. And a lot of it's not really their own fault.
Well, if you think about it, if you want to again put your tinfoil hat on or look at more of like an insidious position, it's if you remove the father, now you have the mother. Now the mother is overwhelmed and she has no choice but to work her ass off to be able to support her kids. So now she's not in the home. So now what happens? You have the kid that's unattended. Well, who's going to take care of the kid? The government's here to help. No need to worry. Just send them here and we will take care of all of it.
Yeah.
And then now you have people that feel right this group of children that are growing up into adults. You have all these children that grow up to feel unworthy, unloved, incapable, and now they have to turn to someone else for their salvation. Well, now you have control. If you have someone that feels fulfilled, they feel loved, they feel certain, they know their power, you can't govern those people.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't control those people. And then like,
Hmm.
again, to say, keeping our tinfoil hats on just for one more second, like, what happened a couple of years ago when everybody just fell in line and not to get too much into detail with that. I don't know your position on that. I don't really, if you dis
Libertarian babies,
well,
that
yeah,
should
yeah,
say it all.
you're right.
Yeah.
I should know your position because we talked a
Yeah.
little bit about this. You're very much aligned with the libertarian views as I am. But when something like that happened a few years ago and everybody fell in line, and it's like, why did these people all believe something right away? Like there was a lot of truth to what was being told, but there was also a lot of lies. And why did everybody believe every single lie that came out of, certain people's mouths from the government? And then you look back at like how we've been raised the last 30 or 40 years, and it kind of does explain a lot of things as to why we're so reliant on our new, essentially like our parents, because the government is who's really been raising us the last 30 or 40 years. So when they tell us what's going to happen next and what we have to do to fall in line, why did so many people fall in line? It just makes perfect sense because that's who they've been falling in line to their entire lives, essentially.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it's like good old 90s parenting. You have this beautiful, curious little spark of life that's like, why? Because I said so. Why? Because I said so. And then you wonder why when they're told to do something, they listen. They don't ask questions because we were told you can't ask questions.
So I've suffered from pretty much every sleep issue under the sun. I'm talking insomnia, sleep paralysis, REM behavioral disorder, exploding head syndrome. But when it comes to sleeplessness, it's really the most common and can be one of the most debilitating conditions of all. And after suffering from sleeplessness for years, I went through all the research and all the papers and all the literature and discovered one secret hidden culprit behind so many people's sleeplessness, including 95% of people out there and my own. And that hidden culprit is two neurochemicals, cortisol and glutamate. I now call them sleep stoppers. And as it turns out, people who suffer from chronic sleeplessness have cortisol and glutamate levels through the roof. And what these two neurochemicals do is keep the mind alert, awake, and racing all night. So as much as you may want to relax and calm down just before bed, if the cortisol and glutamate levels are too high in your brain, it's simply impossible and you're going to be wide awake and alert. But what I've also discovered after years of research is that there's two ancient powerful herbs, ashwagandha and valerian root, that can bring these two sleep stoppers back into balance and in turn naturally support the production of relaxing neurochemicals like GABA, glycine, serotonin, and dopamine. But not only that, there's several other herbs, natural compounds, and even minerals that work synergistically with ashwagandha and valerian root to promote these relaxing, feel-good neurotransmitters that promote relaxation and a feeling of calm just before bed, but more importantly, a deep, rejuvenating sleep. I'm talking about a rejuvenating 7 to 9 hours of deep, uninterrupted sleep every single night that has you waking up feeling energetic, focused, and ready to take on the day. And all of these incredibly safe and effective ingredients can be found in our new powerful formula called Natural Sleep. And for a limited time only, you can get Natural Sleep by going to elitelifenutrition.com/natural sleep and use the discount code SLEEP20 to get 20% off your first order. That's elitelifenutrition.com/natural sleep and use the discount code SLEEP20 to get 20% off your first order.
What are your thoughts on porn in relationships? Like we talked a little about, monogamous relationships, polyamorous relationships, and everything in between. What are your thoughts on people having the ability to watch porn whenever they want? And oftentimes it leads to like fetish porn and just all these types of crazy radical porns that you don't get in everyday life, but it stimulates, like we mentioned just a moment ago too, like the dopamine receptors to then have a preference for like more and more radical, progressively, some might say sick, some might say awesome, videos of things that don't occur in everyday moments, whereas like you're going back to your wife or your husband and it's like you can't get that same stimuli anymore. There's a lot of videos, you've probably seen some of them, about what porn does to your brain, and a lot of people are like anti-porn. They should say cut out porn altogether. It's bad for you, does this, does that. What are your thoughts on porn, and does it have a place in relationships?
Well, none of that is proven. So there is no proof that when you start watching porn that all of a sudden you start having these proclivities that you wouldn't have before. I've had Dr. Deborah So on. I don't know if you know who she is. She's powerhouse. She wrote The End of Gender. She's been on Rogan a whole bunch of times. Like, I highly recommend you look her up. She's doing really fascinating work. So she's a sex researcher and a neuroscientist. So by no means a dummy, and this is actually like her area of expertise. And then there's also Dr. Nicole Prousey, who is a sex researcher based out of California, and she's actually doing current research and publishing it a lot on Twitter. So when it comes to the idea that you're going to be fed something that you think is violent, horrific, even illegal in some cases, and that you're going to be turned on to it because you started with good old solos or girl and you don't know how you ended up here, there's a real fallacy there, even from a neurological standpoint, because when you are introduced something that's an aversion to you, something that does not turn you on, your brain reacts in such a way like, this is an aversion, I don't want this, I am not turned off. Like disgust will come, certainly not turn on or pleasure. If you are experiencing turn on, pleasure, and it is troublesome, and if not illegal content, abusive content, chances are that was what you were searching for. You were just waiting to I guess like find it and seek it out. And what they've done when they take pedophiles, for example, and they are taken into interview rooms with a professional, what ends up coming out most of the time, if they feel that they can say it in like a non-judgmental place and like their conviction is already, has already happened, it's not really affecting anything. It was the thing that they always wanted. They were always a predator. And then Dr. Deborah So's work suggests that there's actually brain abnormalities in pedophiles. So you can actually kind of like see that proclivity in a brain. And so, it was already there, right? And I would fight really hard on saying that you're going to watch porn and become an animal. I don't think that that's true. And I think anyone pushing that narrative has like a very religious backing as to why they're saying that. And if you watch like, this is your brain on porn, chances are that this is funded by or produced by an evangelical group. And I'm not knocking Christianity. I know amazing people that are Christians. I'm very spiritual myself. I think that there is a huge importance to believing in something bigger and more powerful than you. That's not what this is about. But this is saying, if we're going to have these difficult conversations, we have to approach them honestly. If we actually want to help people. Do people have a problem with porn? Absolutely. Is it the porn's problem? No. There's people that have problems with hamburgers. There's people that have problems with gambling. There's people that have problems with drinking and tobacco. Like, name your fix. That thing is the symptom. It's not the root. So if we truly want to get and pull this root out of society, that is people feeling avoidant and having a lack of connection and feeling depressed and whatever the root is for them, then we have to be honest about it and take our ego aside and take our preconceived position aside. Approach it with like a beginner's mindset and saying, like, we all want the same thing. I don't want anyone that's hooked on pornography. I don't think that that's good. I think that there's an ethical way to approach it and an unethical way to approach it. I think lying about the neuroscience is unethical. And I think I've talked to performers that are like, I just want to milk my fans dry. Like, that's gross to me too. I don't support that either. I've always been very open that I'm married, I have kids, that I'm not running away with you. You know what I mean? Like, we're entering like a fantasy land together and like consciously engaging in that as consenting adults. So I think that when you look at pornography in a place, is it good or bad? I think it's like anything else. It's in the dosage. If you're watching 3 hours of porn a day, bad. If you're watching it occasionally because you have a different sex drive than your wife, good, right? Because now she doesn't feel pressure to perform when she doesn't want to. And the latest studies kind of suggest the same thing. So negative outcomes based off of porn consumption are highly correlated if the consumer thinks porn is bad. If he thinks porn is bad and he watches porn has bad outcomes for him. If the guy thinks porn is fine, it's just entertainment, that correlation pretty much goes away. So what this suggests is that there's no issue with porn. What's coming up is kind of an unexamined and unintegrated moral dilemma with pornography, sexuality, and pleasure. And again, like, these studies have been replicated time and time again, but all they do is say, look at porn as bad consumption, but they're not looking at political views, religious views, moral conflict, anything like that, because that would be inconvenient for their story.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I think, like anything else, drugs, alcohol, smoking cigarettes, whatever bad vice, out gambling, like, you can do it in, some drugs, obviously, maybe not all drugs, but you can do it to to a certain extent. You can do and still be healthy. Like, you can drink a couple times a week and be fine. You can, smoke if you want to smoke and you're taking care of everything else, or you can eat crappy and you're going to be okay if you work out and whatever. But yeah, porn to a certain extent can be really bad if you overdo it, if you get addicted to it. I think it personally can mess up your dopamine as far as the release of something, but like anything else, like if you're gambling all the time, that can also mess up your dopamine as well. If you're sitting on your smartphone all day long, scrolling through TikTok and Instagram, that can and like, I think that has an effect on the younger generation, by the way. Like, a lot of our kids, all they're doing all they're doing all day long is just scrolling through their smartphones that they get at like 9, 10 years old now. And it's messing up their attention span. So like, if you go to have a serious conversation with them, you talk about how their day was, they're all over the place. They can't even have a real conversation anymore. Or if they try to meet somebody in the playground, they don't know how to talk to each other anymore. But that does, I think, mess up. It rewires the brain in a lot of ways, and messes up the dopamine pleasure centers for sure, which I think porn can do as well. But I also think that I kind of agree with you as well on this one, where it's not as bad. It's not as big of a deal as I think people make it out to be, like this anti-porn people who say you have to quit altogether. I think there's a place for it if you can do it responsibly and not get addicted to it.
Yeah, and I think that, again, if you're not being honest about what the issue is, you're not helping anyone solve the problem. So if you do have someone that has a compulsion issue, or they have an avoidant personality, or some kind of something else is going on and that's manifesting in an overindulgence in porn consumption, you're like, just cut out the porn. Well, something's going to replace that, and it's going to be another maladaptive habit. It's not going to, good job, you got them to stop watching something that you disagree with. Well, now it might show up in finances or in drinking, or maybe the person starts having violent outbursts, because we know that there have been a ton of studies when you start trying to really control people's sexuality, that violence goes up. I mean, they've done a study, it was like 70 countries or 71 countries, and all but one, there was a positive correlation between sexual repression and violence. So it's like, what do you want? And you want to be able to be in a position where you take extreme ownership and accountability for your actions. It's not like, it's the porn's problem. No, there's an issue. Like there's a compulsion issue, right? There's a delayed gratification issue and you're avoiding something. And why is that? Like you have to ask these deeper questions. And if you have a partner that's watching it, like he's cheating on me and I just need him to stop watching this because it's ruining our marriage. It's the number one thing that I got into with Twitter like yesterday was like porn is bad, it ruins marriages. If you think that it's the screen, that it is simply him masturbating that's ruining the marriage, like no wonder it's failing because you're not willing to have the deeper, more honest conversation as to what is really failing in the marriage. It's not the porn, it's something else. And if you can't talk to him without berating him and shaming him, he's not going to be honest with you. So if you want to fix the marriage, if the goal is till death do us part, remove the shame, remove the blame, and create a space where you guys can have an adult conversation about what is really happening.
Yeah. I think too, a lot of these conversations should be had before marriage, like the whole monogamy thing and whether you would potentially be open to opening up marriages and,
Yeah.
because you're making a lifetime commitment and it's like, you don't really like the guy, I think I forget his name. The lawyer's like Sexton. I'm going to try to get him on the show at some point
Oh
too.
yeah, I just tweeted him.
He's
Yeah.
he's
I
super
love
interesting. He's
him.
actually very like entertaining too, like just
Yeah.
funny and stuff. But he's also
Yeah.
like brilliant when it comes to marriages and the divorce lawyer. I think it's James Sexton, maybe something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's brilliant. Though. I've been listening to his stuff the last like week or so. I'm like, this guy's awesome. But he just makes so many good points about like these tough and one of the other ones too is a prenup before marriage. Like
Mhm.
if you can't have that, it's just such a good point. If you can't have that conversation about even having a prenup about like, all right, what's yours, what's mine, what's ours, how are we going to go into this? And like, if something ever happens, over 50% divorce rate, if something ever happens at some point, how are things going to look like in terms of like what we each get? If you can't even have that conversation without like having a giant fight and, your spouse flipping out on you,
Yep.
that's probably not the right person to marry because
No,
like that's a pretty
they're not
intense.
ready.
No, they're not ready. And maybe it's actually not the right person if they don't ever want to take that like serious conversation and have that to figure out like what would ever happen if this, if things change, which they do. But it's such a good point as far as like in this as well, like you should have this conversation as well. Like what do we do like down the road if like we want to open up the marriage or like if one of us, wants to try something out, we want to, be a little more open about things. Is it something that we're both a hard no on? Are we kind of open to that idea or, like, because if 5 years, 10 years down the road, you're finding that like you don't really want to have sex anymore, or that it's kind of getting stale, or that you want to maybe one of the partners wants to open up and the other one doesn't, you're kind of screwed at that point. If like this person's unhappy with the sex life and they want to go out and explore and the other person doesn't and they're a hard no on that, that's probably going to lead to a divorce. Whereas if you had that conversation 5, 10 years ago, you wouldn't have really got into that problem.
hmm No, I agree. I think you should be able to talk about anything. You know what I mean? And anything as a thought exercise and like see intimate again, like how intimate can you get and not take things personally. It's just like our attachment issues start showing up when we have these conversations. We're like, he's going to leave me, she's going to leave me, I'm unlovable, or I'm going to avoid this because it's too uncomfortable, whatever that is. There's something like 70% of adults have an insecure attachment style. So that's not a recipe for success. And that
Yeah.
probably
Wow.
leads to our marriage issues. And it's being able to understand that our lover is not our parents. They're not going to maybe hurt us or traumatize us in the way that our parents did. And the healing is our job ultimately, right? It's not their job to make us feel safe and whole. Like we have to do that on our own. If I can't feel safe by myself, my husband's not going to make me feel safe. And if he does, it's going to be for like a very short amount of time. Like that's going to be exhausted at some point. I have to be safe within myself so that I can be safe within the marriage.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a good point. And, so when you got married, were you covering all this stuff? Like, and is your husband, if you don't mind me asking, was he in this industry as well? Was he somebody that was around and this like familiar to it?
No,
Or totally.
no, he's a regular guy. He's an investor,
Wow.
an entrepreneur. That's what he does. But we started dating while I was in the industry, so he already knew. Like, he was
Yeah.
kind of along for the ride the whole time and was figuring it out with me.
Wow. So he seems
hmm
like I mean, he must be a very secure guy as far
Oh my
as,
God, yeah,
yeah,
rock
like,
solid. Yeah, rock
yeah,
solid.
I don't know how many guys would be able to do that, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean like like I think he must be pretty comfortable with who he is, and like discussing things with you, knowing that you're a great person. Seems like he was able to get over some of the things that a lot of guys might not be able to get over, or maybe they'd be insecure about it. Like, here's my wife, she's out there for everybody to see. She had sex with this guy or that guy, where it's like, and I'm sure like celebrities kind of deal with this as well when they have like celebrity couples. That Logan Paul's
Hmm.
fiance comes to mind. She's hooked up with like Leo DiCaprio and all these guys, and it's kind of become a big story lately. But it's like, how does somebody like that get over the fact knowing that their wife hooked up with all these other people? Like, what do you think kind of goes in? If you don't mind, again, yeah, like if you don't mind me asking, what do you think your husband, what his thought process is when it comes to things like that?
So the way that he's explained it to me, because I always tell him like you should do interviews because people want to figure you out. Like
Yeah, I
they
think he
really
would
do,
relate to
especially
a lot of
men.
guys. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of men are like, I just need to get inside your brain because to them it's they don't understand it. Like I could never, right? And they're curious about it. The way that he's explained it to me is there's this idea of compersion. And what compersion is, it's being able to experience joy, happiness, or pleasure in someone else's joy, happiness, or pleasure. So you don't need to be involved to be like, I hope she's having a good time. I'm so glad she's having a good time. I'm like honestly happy that she's successful and taking yourself out of it. And this is just like a very extreme version of that. And, any kind of open marriage is an extreme version of that. Like, I'm just happy that she's or he is happy. And there's this, it translates, I guess, to more of the average person when you see a breakup or a divorce. And they're like, I hope he never gets over me. I hope she never gets over me. I hope they end up alone. Well, if they're not allowed to be happy without you, that's horrible. That's not love. You weren't ready for love or a relationship if that's how you're looking at the end of your time together. And I mean, I am pretty convinced like there is nothing that is going to lead my husband and I to a divorce. Like hell or high water, it's not going to happen. But let's play in the reality that it does, like the universe that it does, and it does happen. I don't think either of us would ever have that mindset. I would want the world for them. I hope that you get everything that you want. You know what I mean? You deserve it. You're a good person. And to me, that shows someone who's healed, whole, and ready for a relationship. Because if you look at it because it didn't work out and it doesn't include you, that they no longer deserve to experience life in a beautiful way, then you're probably not a great person.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's just ego. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to see that person happy because it affects your own ego. Like
Hmm.
you don't want to see. I think as a man, this is kind of my point of this, and we're all growing and we're all trying to be better, and I'm trying to get past my own ego and all this other stuff. But like as a man, I think a lot of men would feel like, well, you're comparing yourself to the other men she slept with. Like, is that guy better than me? Is he better looking than me? Does he have a bigger dick than me? Does he have like
Hmm.
bigger muscles than me? And it's always going to be like, oh, well, she hooked up with all these guys. You can see them online, and it's like, as an ego thing, it hurts the ego to be okay with that. And so, like, I think a lot of guys just can't accept that and get past that ego because their ego is always getting like it's always reaffirming. It's like a constant battle of like, well, she hooked up with this. Does that guy do it better? Does he have better sex than I do with her? And it's like,
Hmm.
I think that's really the biggest thing is getting past your ego and letting that go.
Absolutely. I would agree with all of that. I would also say like you are not your ego. And I think growth begins with discerning that, right?
Hmm.
Like you have an ego, you are not an ego. And what is it? Like an ego is like a terrible master but a great servant. So
Mm.
how can you make your ego work for you, right? Like ego gets the book written. It helps you. It can be a very motivating thing. But the moment that you let it take the wheel, chaos is going to happen. So if you find yourself in this place where you have a ton of jealousy, retroactive jealousy over past lovers, and it's a lot of comparison, right? The ego exists by comparing. I know I exist because I'm not you. So it's constantly comparing to validate its existence. If you're doing that in that example, you're probably doing it other places. And comparison is garbage, right? The only thing you should be comparing yourself to is yourself before, yourself a minute ago, a decade ago, whatever it is. It's everyone has different starting points. So if I'm looking at my podcast, for example, and then looking at Logan Paul's, I'm a big fat loser. I'm a giant failure, right? Because I'm not at his numbers. If I look at myself now to when I started, I'm doing great. You know what I mean? So we have to be really careful when it comes to, I guess, just surrendering to our ego and saying, well, that's just the way it is. That's just biology. That's my wiring. I'm allowed this. This is my righteous jealousy, right? It's there for a reason. Or saying, I've got this big, beautiful brain and I can override this programming. Or I want to, I've seen other relationships modeled, other ways of existing modeled, and those seem to be operating in a place of love and not a place of control. How do I figure that out? And it's not to say everyone needs to have an abnormal relationship. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is, like, you can transcend your emotions because they're not you. And you can choose to watch them, to feel them, and let them go. And then ultimately lead with love instead of this possessiveness.
Yeah. You seem like a very enlightened person. What
Just
is your
trying, just
No,
trying
it's
to grow.
good. It's good because these are a lot of the things I've thought and some of the work I've done in the last few years. Like your higher self is really what it's all about. And
Mhm.
I'm thinking like the higher self is up here and it comes down and like, your heart's connected to it and you have like all these like chakras and stuff. And the ego is
Mhm.
like outside, but it's also a tool that can be used inside when you want it to. Like you pull it in for like specific work, or you need a job or whatever, you need to get something done. You can use ego to your benefit, but a lot of people let the ego override, and it's like the
Mhm.
main facilitator of everything they do and believe and feel, for that matter. Um, but it's really just a tool. Like it's an outside thing. It's not actually part of who we truly are at the core and like who our soul is, if you believe in that stuff anyways, which I do. Um, but yeah, what is your spirituality? You mentioned you're a very spiritual person. You're not necessarily religious, it seems like, but spiritual nonetheless.
Yeah, not religious, and I know that that gets picked on 'cause, like, it's a Family Guy episode where they're like, "I'm not religious, I'm spiritual," and it's this hippie chick with all these beads, and she's burning sage. And what I think of when I say spiritual, it's like pre-institutionalized religion. It was back when we remembered that we were connected to God just by existing, right? Like, e- everyone has the ability to connect to the divine, to God, to source, to the universe, whatever you want to call it, because now there's all of these names. But it's like that sense of sovereignty and self-knowing and like faith, right? But it's not faith that I have to go buy or that I have to outsource. It's something that I can go inward and find. And if you look at a lot of Eastern practices, that's kind of what they preach. So if you're looking at like Sufism, or if you're looking at Hinduism or Buddhism, a lot of it is going inward. It's not going outward. And I think that what happened at some point is we outsourced it and we're like, okay, you have to go to confession, otherwise you won't be absolved. I don't believe in original sin. I don't think um, any parent who's online, who's conscious, who's doing the work can look at their baby and say, oh, yeah, original sin is right here. It came into the world with it. Absolutely not. I think like that's the most, like, that's the closest to God I've ever seen is my baby. Um, so I disagree with a lot of that. I believe, yeah, I believe in a soul. I think that the ego is a part of how we can function in this third dimension. It's part of our human meat sack. And it's, again, it's an important thing to be able to compare. So I know I'm here and you are there. But where it gets tricky is when it overrides and all you see is separateness and not connectedness, because it's true but partial, as Mark Gaffney would say. So it's, I am separate, but I'm also connected. And the way that you can think about that is like the cells on your body, right? Like they're separate, they're their own thing, but they're connected to something much bigger. And it's this whole system that works together. And that's kind of how I see people and consciousness and spirituality. Um, yeah, and I think that's probably why my approach to a lot of things is a little bit different, because it's how do I take a lot of the judgment out? And it's really hard because we're human and that is our MO, but it's understanding that I'm a mix of a spirit, a consciousness, something more than human, but I'm also a human. So there's like that human element. And then you get to decide how much of that is going to show up. Is my ape self going to show up, or is a more enlightened version going to show up? And it's not easy. It's like every single day, every single minute, you have to be checking in. Am I doing what I want to be doing? Am I showing up as a mom how I want to show up, or as a wife as I want to show up? Or am I falling short? How can I improve just like one, not even 1%, but a percent of a percent every single day or every single moment? And just because you did something that, you lost your temper, or you made a bad decision, or whatever it was, like you screwed something up, like you always have the opportunity to start over and to like let it go and start fresh and be like, okay, like another shot at being my better self, my higher self.
Yeah, I just checked on something I wanted to mention. I wanted to make sure I mentioned, which is something you brought up too with motherhood. Um, and do you have boys? It seems like you have boys, right?
Two boys.
Two boys, yeah. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but how are you raising the boys that you have today, or in the next couple of years when they start to, their formative years? How are you going to raise them as masculine boys, and what's the importance of raising them as masculine boys in this world that seems to be like, feminizing everything these days and really hating on masculinity?
I think anyone that hates masculinity doesn't understand what it is. Like it's like hating, like, would you say that you hate femininity? Like, we don't hear that. We just hear we hate masculinity. And what I would say that you hate is the lack of masculinity. What you're seeing is like weak men or weak boys, and then they're misbehaving. And some of that's not their fault. Some of that is all of their fault. It depends, right? Like, we have to take it by case basis. But when you try to remove someone's strength or power or slow down so that you can feel safe, what you're ultimately going to do is feel unsafe. Like, if I had a husband that was incapable and incapable of everything and just unsure and wasn't in alignment with his masculinity, I would feel so unsafe. Like, where are we going? What are we doing? Who's raising the children? Like, it would be chaotic. I want him to be fucking strong, sturdy, and have conviction. And that starts so young with babies, really. It starts so young. It's um giving them appropriate tasks to do, letting, like, men love providing, boys love providing. That's part of the masculine. They want to show up. And I'm not talking just finances. I think where it got mutated and twisted is we told men, you are a paycheck and that's how you provide. Men provide in so many ways that are so much more important than a paycheck, especially nowadays. Like, women don't need the paycheck, but we do need men to provide. And telling them that they just need to make sure that they're out earning their spouse, like, that's garbage. And that's going to lead to a man that's so disconnected with his family because he feels like he needs to just make more. So how do you teach providing? Well, it's like, okay, mama needs help with this. Would you help me with this? Like, giving them tasks, letting him, my 3-year-old helps with groceries. Like, he's like,
Nice.
loves it too. He picks up these heavy bags and he waddles into the kitchen and he's so proud of himself. I
That's
let him
awesome.
use scissors. He helps me cook, like actual cook. We have a fire range. I don't let him use my knives. He's got his own knives that are dull. But giving him tools to use and saying, like, you are capable, praising his effort is big. Not oh good, you're so smart, or way to, like, it's more praising the like the behavior that you want to perpetuate. So, like, way to stick with it. I know that was tough, right? Teaching perseverance, letting him feel his feelings, because that's a part of masculinity too, is like being integrated. Like, you want a father that loves with his whole heart. Like, it's not just like this machismo guy who has no feelings. That's so dated. That's not the true masculine. The true masculine loves and protects. So, like, you're allowed to feel your feelings. Now let's work through them. Don't be overcome by them. And that goes for men and women. So yeah, I think it's just like teaching them they're strong and capable and letting them take age appropriate risks. Like, if he's doing something, I'm like, oh, he's going to hit himself in the head with that. I let him figure it out. I'm not like sitting there helicopter parenting. And that goes in back into like the devouring mother archetype that a lot of people reference with Carl Jung. And it's this mom that's overbearing, overprotective, puts a bubble around their kid, and they can never explore the world around them. And then that is how you end up with an incompetent man that doesn't know his power, his sovereignty, and can't provide. And now he's taking it out on the world because someone did him wrong. So that's the last thing that I want. So just trying to provide certainty.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're doing a great job. Honestly, it sounds like you got the right philosophy for raising these kids, and I love the example of the 3-year-old dragging in the grocery. That's awesome. He must
And
be
he
so
loves
pumped.
to, because
Yeah,
again, it
he
goes back
does.
to like that he wants to help. Men want to be helpful. This idea that like men are useless, we don't need them, like, that's such a shitty perspective. And I guarantee with that attitude, that's probably the type of men that you encounter.
Hmm.
It's like you put out what you end up attracting. Like, so I mean, even at 3, he wants to help, he wants to be useful. So I allow him to be useful. I'm not like, I'm a strong, independent woman, I've got my own groceries. What are you saying to that kid? Like, no,
Yeah,
let him help you.
yeah. And I guess the the contrasting side to this is like the divine feminine, which I think you talk about as well. Like, what's the importance of that, and what's your take on the whole like femininity thing?
I think that a lot of women have lost they've lost touch with it. Like we've been stuck in our masculine for a long time. I think everyone has both, right? And everyone has like a little bit, like their mixture is going to look a little bit different. Like everyone has a different cocktail, but most women tend to be feminine dominant, right? So we have been taught to be masculine, and then that brings us into this place of now competing with our husbands, and then we wonder why there's no intimacy or romance. Well, now he sees you as a challenge. He can't protect you or um like he's not going to look at you the same way if you are a challenger or if you're a competition versus if like you're something to be nurtured and cared for, right? Like he wants to take care of you. And it's not to say like be helpless, but you're not in competition with your husband. So you can be soft, you can be surrendered. There's different ways to lead. Like some strength looks differently. I think for women, I think that it's a lot easier to convince a room full of men with softness, with tenderness, with nurturing, and like that more maternal energy that we have versus like going in there and trying to lean in like those books tell you to do. I think what ends up happening is you're like, okay, this is weird. She's aggressive because it's abnormal behavior. So like something doesn't really click for men. But I think if you can go in there and just like know that by being soft, by surrendering, it's like you can get what you want without forcing. It's almost like the difference between the masculine and the feminine is the masculine is driven towards and is like achieving and going after, where the feminine is attracting.
Right.
So you both can be super successful and build businesses and do whatever, your passions and your career, I guess, needs, but it's the way that you go out about it is differently. So like women have more of an availability to just like attract and manifest things. So by going in with kindness, with love, treating people like they're competent instead of, trying to like berate them and be like the big boss in the room, I think that your success is going to just kind of show up that way. Obviously, you like still have to do your graphs and your charts and like show up for work and do whatever, have your meetings, but I'm just saying it's like more of an energetic thing. So when you show up with softness, people want to show up for you. They want to perform for you. If like you're the head of a sales team, if you show up with softness, like you're going to have a sales team that like works their ass off for you because they want to provide. But if you go in there with that masculine energy, they're going to shut them down every single time. So I think it's your approach and your tone to how you kind of approach like work, life, relationship, mothering, whatever that is.
Do you think that that it's tougher these days for women to keep that femininity based off the fact that in large part a lot of these women now have to work like a lot more hours, and it's usually like the mother and the father going out and working unless one of them makes a killing, but these days it tends to be a lot of both parents have to go out to make a living. Does it become hard to then come back and like assume a different role of like being more feminine and being more of like the attractor, and whereas the man is the provider still, and like switching roles? Do you think it's harder for women these days to step into that femininity and still have a masculine man in their house, or is it like kind of overrated as well as far as that goes? And John Gray actually talks about this as well a lot with some of his recent articles and books and stuff like that.
I think it's definitely challenging. I think it's like any other habit. If you're doing one thing over a long course of time and in a repetition, then to consciously turn that off just because you're changing environments can be really hard. One thing that I've learned with like cognitive behavioral therapy is you can kind of create a totem. So whether that's a piece of jewelry or a t-shirt, or like maybe you throw your hair up with it's like a hair tie, it's something, a physical reminder of now I'm in this other function, I'm in this other role, I'm in this other energetic space. It takes a lot of effort. It takes consciousness. It's not easy, but you can't have two masculine forces within the family dynamic that are at the head. Like even if you're in like a homosexual relationship, like there's still usually a balance as far as the energy goes. If you have both people that are just like kind of competing with each other, you're just going to be fighting like dogs, cats and dogs, at the end of the day. So one of you has to be in the feminine space. And in that boy crisis, they use a lot of examples of some men that are more in their feminine, where they gave up their career to be stay-at-home dads, and the wife was like the high powered CEO and she really wanted to go after the career, and that was what worked for them. So I think you just have to be honest. And I think most women honestly would want a masculine man. And if that's what you want, you have to find your feminine. And again, if you want to go be a killer out there in the corporate world, go do that if you want. I would still say if you lead with softness, you're probably going to get better results. But if that's what you want to do and it's working for you and you're happy and energized, by all means, go ahead and do it. But don't bring that home, right? Like your husband is not your competition. He's not your employee. He's not your boss. He's not any of that. He's your husband. So you have to be able to surrender and kind of like let him take on that lead.
Yeah. Just a few more questions. This has been a phenomenal interview, though. I really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
But really, it's a lot of fun. I'm having a great time. I don't
Me
want to
too.
take up too much more of your time, though. I know we've been going on for a bit, but it's really been awesome. But on for your last point there, it kind of reminded me of something that I wanted to bring up earlier, which is women in general, like overwhelmingly in general, want a masculine man. But it seems like too, and it seems, for instance, like a lot of women, I've dated a number of women who were into lesbian porn, and it seems like a lot of women in general are into that thing, like they want to have like some type of, like in the back of their mind, they want to have some type of sexual encounter with another woman at some point in their lives. What do you think that is? Whereas they're like into the masculine, they're into and they would consider themselves a straight woman,
Hmm.
but they also have that like desire to hook up with another woman at some point and have a lesbian experience. What do you think that comes down to? Like, where does that come from?
I think some of it is women, like some women really love seeing their partner turned on, like their man turned on. Like that in itself is a turn on. We women love being desirable. Like that is what really gets us going. It's like we want to know you are so into everything and like I am a goddess to you and then I am like ready for whatever. And I think that on some level they understand if there's like another woman involved that's going to kind of exponentially heat things up, and it can maybe make them more comfortable to be a little bit more sexually expressive because now there's someone else to play off of versus that intimacy of just like two people. So it becomes a little bit more performative and not necessarily in a bad way. Anyone who's been in a relationship for a long time knows that there's times that you perform, and maybe performing can also be a turn on for you, right? Like there's some times where like I just want to give to my husband. I don't want anything. I just want to like be this kind of siren for him. And that's all the entertainment that I need. And I'm like, yeah, I did it. I crushed that one. You know what I mean? Like pat myself on the back. And I think that some women like that and some women more than others. And I think that that's a really cool way to do it. I know a lot of women that their relationship is quote closed, but they're allowed to bring other women into the space and that works for them. And they just love seeing their man just like so like lost in pleasure and sensuality and being able to kind of be this goddess to him in that space. And people are just saying that's crazy, but I've seen it. I've seen it work. They're still married. They're still happy. I've done it in the past, and we're still married and have a great family, and we're still happy. So there are ways to do it where it's not like he's gonna leave you for the other woman. He was gonna leave you for the other woman anyways. If that's like how easy it is, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there, he's not there because the rules. He's there because he wants to be, and I think that's important to understand. But yeah, I think it's like it's a cool way to bring novelty into it as well. And like bringing in another woman isn't threatening. Like again, coming down to safety, bringing in another man can make you feel unsafe. And then there's no point in having sex if you don't feel safe because you're not going to enjoy it. I think there's a lot of reasons.
I think that it was like in my examples, just from personal experience, it was like they wanted to watch like a lot of lesbian porn, and it was like
Mm.
from what I like discerned from talking to them about it, like it's like open conversations and stuff, but it was more like they felt that women knew how to like basically hit the right spots with like eating each other out, like that, those types of things, whereas like men were more like aggressive and it wasn't as like sensual. Does that make sense to you as well?
Yeah, I think like straight porn, most porn in general, but specifically straight porn or like guy porn is made for a male, right? It's made for male consumption. So most women are not going to be turned on by it because it's not made for them. Where if you're watching a lesbian scene, it's a lot softer, it's a lot slower, it's a lot less aggressive. Usually it's shot like a lot more cinematic and what you would maybe categorize as erotica and not necessarily pornography. So it's less threatening. And I think it goes back to safety. A lot of that comes back to safety for women. So it's like it's a safe and easy entry point for them to play around with sensuality and turn on that's not so aggressive and obvious. Women like things to be complicated, and we want to be wined and dined and romance. That's why women are huge consumers of erotic fiction. We like all of the details. So I think when it comes to porn, like that, men want to get to the point. We want to see everything up close and personal, get to it, right? So it's very different drivers. So I think if you're watching lesbian porn, it's kind of like a sweet spot for both people, where both people can kind of find turn on, that's like not overwhelming for the female brain.
Oh, cool. What is, I gotta ask you this too. What's your best sex tip for a man, and what's your best sex tip for a woman?
Mm. So for men, I would say that it's to be super present, like be present and patient and realize that your ovens warm up at very different speeds. Like the average man, it's about 15 minutes to get fully aroused. And then the average woman, it's about 45 minutes to be aroused. Now, most people do not have 45 minutes just for the warm up, let alone for the whole thing. So how can you make up for that gap in turn on? I would say that for women, most women, turn on is everything throughout the day, everything throughout the week. It's not just in the bedroom. So it's the eye contact, it's the little grazes, it's the way that you grab her back. It's like you knowing her love language and doing that, whether that's acts of service, using your words, quality time, like there's a whole host of them. So knowing what she finds valuable and understanding and then expressing the love in that way. And all of those things lead to her feeling safe, loved, seen, wanted, desired. And then in that space, that when you do go to engage in sex, like she's ready, right? Like you've been sending flirty texts or you left a note or, right? It's all of these things can be considered foreplay. It doesn't necessarily need to be physical. So I would say that's probably like my number one quick go-to step for men. For women, I would say it's know what you need for the bare minimum, like to be able to experience pleasure. So if you know that you need a clean environment, like you don't want your kids' toys all over your room or the laundry pile is going to drive you nuts. It's like set up one space for success and really hone into that. Like if you feel like you need a lot of primping before that, it's like me. If I really want to enjoy it, like I need to make sure that I want to feel like a goddess. Like I want to have oil on. I want to have my perfume. So I just do that every day because like that makes me feel good. And I operate differently when I'm doing dishes, when I'm going to the grocery store, when I'm podcasting. I operate differently if I did like that one thing for me, right? Which is just to like make sure I'm moisturized and that I smell nice. If those two things are there, then and like I'm setting myself up for success. So know what like your minimum barrier of entry is and just do that thing. Like do that thing for yourself because you deserve it.
Yeah. And what are your two, or I guess a couple love languages that you would say personally for yourself?
Quality time is definitely probably my number one, if not number two. And then physical touch. Those are my two.
Okay. I'm
What are
glad.
yours?
Mine are physical touch, and not in any order, but I know that it's definitely physical touch and quality time. And I like words of affirmation too. That's another
Mm-hmm.
one. It's just, and
Yeah.
then the other two to me are like, whatever. I don't really care about them, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
gifts. I scored a 0 on gifts. It
yeah,
does
me, I
nothing
was
for
very,
me.
very low on the
Yeah.
gift one when I did it. But I felt like a lot of girls these days like the gift one. And it's okay, but I just feel like to me it's more like a superficial one. You know what I mean? It's not like, and it could just be because I'm not that type, but it seems like
Mm-hmm.
that's more like, oh, it's like a girl just wants to get a bunch of shit, and it's like she
Mm-hmm.
wants to like a bunch of purses or this or that, and it's like to me it doesn't really seem like that's a true like way of showing love, of expressing love between some like two people, because it's bringing something from the outside in. But again, I could be wrong. It's just kind of my feelings on it, but I don't.
I think that I think that it's probably an immature level of love. And I think that if it's like a bag or shoes or whatever, that's just a very immature expression of love. I think if that translates into how does he provide for me, whether it's like he he knows that I love this drink from the coffee shop, so he just goes and gets it for me at random, or he will leave a little note. Like I could see a world where those things could be considered a gift. So it's like, what kind of gift is she expecting slash saying that she needs to feel love? And then those are very different. Like a girl that's like, I need that Chanel bag to feel loved versus like, I just want you to think of me when you make a coffee order, right? Like those are two very different things.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a good discernment of the two, and one of them seems like more like gold diggerish, whereas the other one
Hmm.
seems like genuinely like, oh, he's just showing that he loves me, like he cares for me, he's thinking about me, that type of thing.
Exactly. He's thinking about me.
Yeah, so I
Hmm.
guess that makes sense, but I don't know. I guess I got to find girls that don't have
It's
the gift giving one. That seems like a good amount of them have that. But then there's a lot of them too that have the quality time one, which is I think is a great one. Um,
That'd be a fun exercise. And like if it's like
yeah.
date one, two, or three, is to do your love language quiz together because then you can also see if there's one that you're just unwilling to do, right? If one is completely outside of your comfort zone, you're like, I will never be good at acts of service. It's not what I want to do or how I want to show my love. Okay, well, we're just not for each other. That was fun.
Yeah, but you know what? It's like I think I don't if I remember this correctly years ago when I did the thing, but it's like you can have your own love languages and then you can
Mhm.
be like the ones you like and then the ones you can give out, like they could be different. So like acts of service, I like doing that for girls, like I
Mhm.
can do that. That's cool. Whatever the other ones, but it's like I don't know, maybe you're right, like that should be like a first date question or a second date question, like what, like figure out like what's your your love language, because I think there is a lot to those. I think that's a good theory on how people feel love in relationships. And what's your husband's? Does it like match up with you as well?
Yeah, we're like the same, which is really good.
Yeah.
There's this really good audio book. I don't know if it's an actual book too, but it's by the spiritual teacher. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh. He's like this Vietnamese kind of guru, and I think the lecture was Teachings on Love, and he points out without understanding, like you can't love because let's say that you hate strawberry milkshakes, right? Like you just fucking hate strawberry milkshakes with all of your being. And I love them. And I make you strawberry milkshake every night. And I'm so happy to do it. And I give it to you. And I'm so proud. And then you don't want to crush my spirit. So then you are like, thank you. And you're gulping this down with
It's so
resentment.
good.
And you're like, please love me less because I don't want this. If I don't understand your aversions and what you don't like, then you can't feel my love. I'm making it harder for you to feel my love. And then that ends up reciprocating.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I guess, got to stop pretending that you like the milkshake though. It's like
Yeah. And be like, I really fucking hate this drink. Thank you for making it for me. I
you're
really
so nice.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We try a
But
different
this is
flavor maybe. Yeah.
right. Yeah. Do this instead.
Yeah, that's a good
Hmm.
idea. All right. One last question. Do you still actively do some of the work that you were doing before as far as the porn stuff goes, or do you do you feel like you're out of that permanently, or is that something you're like doing now or maybe would do again in the future? Like,
So I still have an OnlyFans. It is a lot more modest than my previous work. So it's just myself. And it's interesting because the thing that does the best on there is just connection. Like people just want to talk. It's not always overtly sexual. Like some people just really don't have someone to talk to. And that sucks. So like what is the option? Like make shame them and blame them and take this thing away or say like this is a healthy substitute until they find something else, right? Like it's providing some level of connection. So like chatting is the number one thing on OnlyFans, but there is still some content, but again, it's very different content than what I've previously shot. And as far as like would I ever do it again, like the bigger scenes, I don't think I'd ever work for another company unless I had ownership over the content in perpetuity.
hmm,
That would be like a non-negotiable for me, and like some kind of rev share over the sales to where I felt like it was fair. Because I'm the one that pays the consequence of that choice, not the big company. Like you're not seeing these multi-billionaire CEOs get berated for what they do, right? Like they're allowed to do whatever, have a family, and not be attacked online, but I don't have that privilege. So I better be compensated for it if I were to do it again. But so that would be step one. And I don't know. Like I feel like I did it And I don't, it would have to be something that was like really alluring for me to consider it because I feel like I did everything I wanted to do.
All right, this is the last question because the last thing you said, what are your thoughts on the whole Lena the plug situation? I'm sure you heard of that thing. Like, is
Mhm.
that to you, is that like a degrading type of thing, or is that something that you're like, well, you support it because they were both okay with it, the husband and the wife, and I don't know. I don't really know the full scope. I'm just kind of heard like the snippets of it, the headlines of it, but is that something that you like would do in a situation, or is that like kind of too degrading?
So I guess when it comes to like what is degrading, I think ultimately what's degrading is an act that's being forced upon you without your consent or without like a full body yes, right? Like if you're doing something and part of you is like kind of what do you like collapsing in some sort of way and you're like I don't want to be here. I think then that's when it's degrading. But if you have a full body yes and you are so turned on, I don't think that anything can be degrading, right? Like if I'm doing something with my husband, there is nothing I do with him that is going to be degrading. Maybe it looks like that to some people, but like everything is a full body yes. um What's interesting about her dynamic is that they have been shooting with other women for as long as they've been together, and it's never been an issue. She does one scene with one professional, and all of a sudden she is for the streets, right? She is
Yeah.
horrible. She's a bad mom. She's a bad wife. And there's this quote, and it's something along the lines of, I'll never know why we have been taught to judge the witch instead of the people that burnt her. And that's how I feel as like a porn star. It's like I'll never understand why we're taught to shame the people that are making conscious choices for themselves that don't affect you, but we're not taught to look at the people that are trying to tear them down. And I guess where that's relevant is she does this thing that I'm sure she talked about with her husband at length. I'm sure she didn't just go off and do it against his like his will. Like, I'm sure it was a joint venture. But then what you have is you have these tabloids and you have these talking heads, including Candace Owens, which is crazy, that put pictures of her 3-year-old up next to a picture of her in the scene. That's that's absolutely unethical and just it's disgusting. It's disgusting. You're bringing in like a child into this, right? And you can say, "Oh, well, she should have known better." Like, no, she's doing something for adults with adults. It has nothing to do with her daughter, right? What I do in my bedroom with my husband has nothing to do with my children. I do not want them walking in. That is none of their business. It's the same with the internet. It's your job to protect your kids from websites that they shouldn't be on, right? There's stuff that is for adults. That scene was shot for adults. So to put her up on there and say she's a bad person, look at her kid, you're the bad person because you just put her kid's face all over the internet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great point, actually.
Mhm.
But so do you worry though at one point that like something like that would happen to you, or like how your kids might, how your sons might feel one day if they go on and they see like all these people talking about their mom, like you in this case,
Mhm.
um, trying to like spin it around like kind of like Candace did in that situation. And again, I like Candace. I agree with her in some things, good amount of
Mhm.
things, but in some things I think she's a little too, uptight or whatever about like she can be annoying in some situations or wrong, I think, in other situations. But are you worried about like how your sons would think of you and your, past history of doing this, or perhaps like, them having to deal with something when they get a little older about talking about what their mom did?
Mhm. No, I mean I absolutely do because you have no idea how they're going to handle it. They're their own people and they're going to ultimately have their own values and principles and hopefully we have some influence over that in the beginning years, but ultimately they're going to have to be their own man at some point, right?
Yeah.
I think it's how what kind of man am I trying to raise? What kind of man is my husband trying to raise? And that's one that stands up for himself, stands up for his tribe, that doesn't go along to get along, that doesn't tolerate bullying or cruelty, that stands up for themselves, right? That knows their worth, that knows that sex isn't bad, the naked body's not bad, pleasure is not bad, consent is not bad, shame has no place in the bedroom, and that content was shot for adults before I even had kids, right? Like, and also that mom is a whole person. I'm not just a mom, right? That's a role, that's a function, a very important one, a very, very, very important one. But there's a lot more to me. And this idea that we have to exile sexuality and sensuality from mothers because they're now mothers is insane. And I think that also leads to a lot of conflict within the marital space because you have that whole Madonna whore complex. So now she's this Madonna and she's not allowed to be lusted after, wanted, desired because she's just my kid's mom. I can't see that in her. I can't be intimate with that way. We have to turn off the lights, or I can't do that act with her. And she's the mother of my kids. Like, no, she's your wife. She is your wife, and she's still very much a sexual being. And enjoy it, right? Like, like there's roles, and it's like it's almost like a jacket. Like, I'm not momming right now. Am I a mom? Yes, but like, am I mothering right now? No, I'm not. I'm podcasting. I'd be a terrible podcaster if my head was like, what are my kids doing right now? Blah blah blah. It's just roles and functions. So, I think we have to kind of move past this relatively new concept of that because you're a mom, you're no longer allowed to be sexual.
Yeah. Well, I think you're doing a great job with raising them from what I can hear, the little bit I've heard today. I think you're teaching them some great morals and values, and I think they're going to be just fine.
Thank
Candice,
you.
can you, no problem. Can you leave us with the send off takeaway message and also a place our listeners can check out your latest work, what you're up to right now?
Takeaway message. Oh my gosh. I would say that you are lovable and don't let someone else tell you what you deserve or what your value and worth are. And you can have the life of your dreams if you want it and you believe that you're worthy of it. So you have to just remember that. And then if you liked this conversation, you want to check out my podcast, it's Chatting with Candice. It's anywhere that you get podcasts, and Candice Horbacz on all the socials.
Awesome. I think you got a book in you too. So I'm looking forward to a book that
We'll
you're going to write
see.
soon.
Yeah, we'll see. That'd be fun.
Yeah, you got a lot of good stories, a lot of great information too. Honestly, I learned a lot myself just talking to you today. So thanks
Thank
again,
you.
and I look forward to talking to you soon.
You too.